So in 2016, I was working at a different organization doing jail decongestion work. And this was the start of the very violent campaign by the Duterte government against drugs. So we were seeing so many people in detention who did not want to be released because they were afraid that when they get released, they'll end up being killed. And so it was, I couldn't understand why they would prefer to be detained, especially considering how terrible the conditions are in Philippine jails. So I attended a few drug policy trainings, and I met some other Filipino lawyers. And then after these trainings, we continued to keep in touch and to attend all these different meetings to try to look at what can we do about the situation about the killings, the situation about the overcrowded prisons. And we would hear lawyers say that they were okay to provide assistance as long as people were not really involved with drugs. So we were reacting to that and saying, but it doesn't remove your right to counsel if you do take drugs. But apparently, the legal community thinks otherwise. But we also couldn't blame them because so many lawyers were getting killed. So we decided around late 2017 that there was a gap that needed to be addressed. There needed to be a legal organization to provide assistance for people who use drugs without requiring them to stop using before services were given. So that was the first thing that we were thinking of. As far as I know, we may be one of the few organizations in the Philippines that do not require people who use drugs to abstain from drug use before they can avail of our assistance and our services. The other important aspect that we saw needed to be addressed, we realized that no matter how many cases we take on, no matter how hard we follow up people getting released from detention, if our drug laws remain punitive, if our drug laws continue to criminalize drug use and possession of very minimal amounts, the situation would not change. We would still be overwhelmed with so many people in detention. The justice system would still be clogged. So our realization was we needed to push for law reform. We needed to push for a change in drug policy. We needed to end criminalization. So that's how StreetLawPh was formed. And until now, our goals are still very clear. One is to push for humane drug policy, which means ending criminalization, changing our existing punitive drug laws, shifting towards a public health approach, accepting that the criminal justice system is not the right venue to address issues in relation to drugs, when it should be public health experts, social welfare, economic solutions, instead of sending people to jail. And the second is to protect the rights of people who use drugs, to try to prevent any further violence to be done against them by providing paralegal education and skills, teaching communities of people who use drugs how to navigate the legal system, what their rights are, how to protect their rights, and once they are arrested or incarcerated, how to help people get released from detention. Our punitive drug law penalizes, imposes a penalty for possession of drug paraphernalia. This includes possession of syringes and needles. And this part of the law prevents people from accessing clean needles and syringes. We can't have any needle and syringe exchange programs out in the open because of this provision of the drug law where you could still get arrested even for possession just of the paraphernalia, like of the materials that you need to use when you are taking drugs. And this, of course, prevents people from, well, it's a limitation on preventing HIV transmission, preventing hepatitis C and other, blood, how do you say that? Bloodborne diseases. So it's also not surprising to find that in our detention facilities, for example, many of those who are arrested for drug-related offenses are also HIV positive because the needle sharing and if I understand correctly from the communities that we work with, people improvise. They use different ordinary objects as needles. And of course, this causes a lot of health problems and complications. So yes, there is indeed a direct correlation between our prohibitionist, the punitive drug law, and access to HIV services, access to harm reduction, access to health care. Of course, this doesn't, we're not even talking yet about the stigma and discrimination that prevents people from going out and saying that, hi, I'm a drug user, I need to get help. Because if you admit that you're drug using, then you would be targeted for arrest. So why would you admit that? Like, why would you go out and say, I need help with my injecting drug use? When it would be taken against you, it could be a reason for you to get arrested or worse, killed. Basically, our punitive law prevents HIV services from being fully enjoyed by those who need it the most. It prevents access to healthcare. It prevents access to the most basic, like in other countries, it's so basic to have access to clean needles and syringes. In the Philippines, it's illegal. So it's really a barrier. Like, and I would even say it's not just a barrier, it's a huge brick wall that would prevent people from getting access to healthcare. We have seen in the work that we do that people who are arrested and detained for drug-related offenses can actually play an important role in leading access to justice activities. For instance, we provide paralegal skills training to people who are in detention, and they act as the first aid, legal first aid for their fellow detainees. So let me give you an example. In one of the jails in the island of Cebu, we trained paralegal aides in the female jail. And during one of our meetings, they called our attention to the fact that there was a 14-year-old girl detained among them. We would not have known about the situation if they had not informed us. So they not only learn about the laws to navigate the legal system for their own cases, they also watch out for violations of rights within the detention facilities. So because they called our attention that there was a 14-year-old girl detained, we were able to find a way to hold a case conference with the court to inform the court that there is a 14-year-old among the adult detainees, which is illegal in the Philippines, and to find a way to contact her family, and then to find a children's organization that offers support for young people involved in criminal offenses, children in conflict with the law. And after a few months of lobbying and with the help of the jail paralegals, she was released back to her family and enrolled in the program for in this organization involving children. So their role in the access to justice work that we do is crucial because they are the ones in the jails. And as we tell them during our trainings, we leave after the trainings. We are not there with them. So we are only there to facilitate, to train. But in the end, it's the women, it's the men who are trained as paralegals, who are detained, who are accused of drug-related offenses. They're the ones who do the documentation. They're the ones who try to understand how the law works and explain it to their fellow detainees. Try to explain how to teach family members to follow up cases. they're the ones who do all of this while we are not around, because the time that we spend in the jails is very limited. Maybe an hour or two during a session once or twice a month. But throughout the whole time that we're not there, it's the paralegals doing all of this work. So I really believe that they do a lot of leadership within their communities. And we've found this to be very helpful. A lot of them during meetings, they tell us, oh, attorney, we've already secured the release of 4 people, just one person. Like, and then they would say, but I'm still here. So, but that's also like a normal reaction that they would feel envy and regret that although they're able to help other people, most of the time for their own cases, they also struggle. So we also try to teach them that it's not selfish to also work on your own case. And it's something that they learn to accept, that it's okay to also follow up your own case, not to feel guilty about that. But you can imagine the role that they play, how important they are, especially in situations like the Philippines where jails are extremely overcrowded. Congestion rates could go as high as 2,000%. And this is the extreme example. In some of the jails that we work with, well, the requirement is that for every 500 detainees, there should be a jail paralegal officer who is managing their cases. But in many detention facilities, it's just not possible because there are too many people in detention. And that's where the jail paralegals help. They help document those who need assistance with, those, for example, who have been too far in between hearings. Like, I haven't had a hearing in a year. There's no way for us to know that until the jail paralegals lets us know that there is this situation. Or she was supposed to be released. There was already an order during the last hearing, but why is she still here? These are the things that they call our attention to, and because of their work, because they are actively documenting access to justice issues in the jails, we are able to provide assistance. We wouldn't be able to do these things if they were not making us aware of it. So their role is really crucial, especially in systems, like in structures where the formal, official persons responsible for this task are overwhelmed. You'll be surprised. I once brought a law school valedictorian to one of our sessions, and she was shocked because the jail paralegals were able to answer all my questions about criminal procedure. And things that she said, I didn't even know how to answer that. I don't even know the answer to your question. And I'm top of my class. And I had to explain to her, well, you don't have skin in the game. You can take the exam, and after your exam, you can forget about it. For them, it's life or death. It's freedom. So they're very motivated to learn. We try to design a curriculum where we consult them every step of the way. What do you want to know? What are you interested in learning? What would be most helpful for you? A lot of them hear legal terminology in court, and they don't know what's going on. Because the public attorneys are also taking on so many cases, there's not really enough time to explain to their clients what the procedures are. So that's where the paralegals also come in. So we provide a curriculum where we teach them generally about the legal system, so they understand the bigger system where their case is part of. And then we go into more detailed specifics like criminal procedure. What are the different modes of release? We teach them the general legal system first, so that they can situate themselves, their case, within the whole legal system. So very basic, what are the branches of government? What are the agencies involved in your case? Who are the personalities during a hearing? For example, what is the role of the judge? What is the role of the prosecutor? What is the role of the public defender or the defense counsel? That basic, so they understand how the system works or not work. Then we teach them which agencies are important for following up cases, because they also in turn teach their families. This is where you go if you need to ask for this document. We also teach them the rules of criminal procedure, something that you learn in law school for one semester, they learn in one Saturday. But we design it in such a way that it's interactive. We design a game, for example, like a snakes and ladders game where people roll dice to figure out what steps you need to take before your case can progress from step one, from arrest all the way to the decision of the court. So it's not like straight lecture where you just talk about the law and this is what it says. We have to make it viable for people who are not really, we don't have any legal professional background. Many of them are not even college graduates. We'd be lucky if there was someone who finished high school among the jail paralegals. But because they are very interested, they easily grasp the concepts. And I think in a way, because we can also speak the language, we try to avoid legal terminology or at least explain the legal terminology so they understand what's going on. When a judge, for example, says this, what does that mean? And then one of the important parts of our curriculum, which we did after consultation with the public attorneys, is that they said to us that it's important for us to be able to read the narrative because we don't have time to talk to the clients, interview them. So the people who are detained need to be able to tell their story in a way that is easy for us to understand. So part of our training is teaching them how to organize their narrative, teaching them to start from chronological order, for example, so that the lawyer immediately when they read it, they can see, so this is what happened. But it's also a source of a lot of heartbreak because when we teach them, when we do the training to, we call it affidavit making, but it's not really a legal affidavit. It's more of a narration of their experience during arrest, why were they arrested. You would also see all the human rights violations that are committed against them in the process of their arrest. So it's always heartbreaking to read, but also very eye-opening. So this is where the violations happen. This is where the problems arise. And we try to teach them to use it as a way to communicate with their lawyers. So the lawyers will understand, this is what happened to us, this is where we need help. This is what we need help with. And then we ask them, like every few sessions, is this session helpful? Do you need to learn something else? So for people who are incarcerated for drug-related offenses, they always request, could you tell us more about the rules on plea bargaining for drug offenses? And so we spend an entire afternoon just answering questions about that. Then there are those who are interested. What does it mean when you say that I can apply for probation? And then we spend another afternoon just talking about it. And it's even better if we could invite someone from the probation office to tell them, like, these are the requirements that you need to submit. So it's very community-led. We do the training, but it's led by them. We ask them what they need, and it's not like one-time consultation, no. Every few sessions, we ask them, is this helpful? Are you learning something, or is this learning useful for you? What else do you want to know that you feel would be helpful? We invite law students to intern with us or to volunteer with us, well, for a number of reasons. One is to, of course, to introduce them to the idea that there is a need for drug policy reform, and law students who will become future lawyers, future policymakers, future judges, future government officials will play an important role in that. So we want to provide them with this perspective that is normally not discussed in law school. Because sadly, our legal education, it's still a lot of memorization. You memorize a law, you don't really have time to examine if this law is impacting people in a negative way. And it's something that we introduce them to, this idea that they can be critical and it's okay. And to recognize that just because something is legal doesn't automatically mean that it's just. And more importantly, that they have a duty not just to accept injustice, but to bridge that gap between what is legal and what is just. So this is something that I always tell them all the time. You can't equate what is legal with justice. And justice has many definitions, has many faces, because we have a tendency to think of justice as just going to the court, filing a case. But for many people, justice is food on the table. Justice is seeing your family, being able to spend time with your family. So we have to recognize that there are many different definitions of justice. It's not just the one that is what the legal system tells us. And one of the important learnings too that we try to impart to our law students is to empathize, to learn to see what it's like to be on the other side, because they will become future judges, future prosecutors, future public defenders. We don't want them to go into this work just looking at case folders and forgetting that inside those case folders are actual human beings. So for us, the important part of the work is to constantly remind the future of the legal profession to humanize the people that they have to deal with, to not to forget the humanity. Because there's a, if you have all of these case folders piled up in front of you, it seems difficult to avoid that you forget that there are actual people involved. So we also try to teach them that when they study the law, and this is my incentive for them, I tell them that it's actually easier to remember the laws if you don't think of it as just an exam that you have to pass. If you associate the laws that you're reading with how it affects people's lives, if you think of a person's face while you're reading a provision of criminal procedure, for example, if you remember this person who has been detained for so many years, you will not forget that provision of the law. So I think of it as it's a way to put a face behind the rules that you read. Because if you just think of it as an exam that you have to overcome, there's not really a lot of chance for you to feel your profession. And so we try to teach them by bringing them to the jails. I have this orientation where I ask them, who wants to go to jail? And they're like, huh? But a lot of people raise their hands and say, of course we're going just to visit. But during your visit, it's important to remember a few things. One is that you do not promise, you do not make promises. You go there to listen, to try to give the help that we can give. But we don't promise that you're going to set people free, because that's not going to be up to us. A lot of it, there's so many factors that need to fall into place before that happens. So we don't overpromise. The second is not to react when the moment you enter the jail, you're assaulted by the others that will face you the moment they open the gates. Because I always have to remind my law students who are in air-conditioned classrooms that the jails are overcrowded. There's more people than what the buildings allow, so there's no space. And so ventilation is really a problem. And that results in, from the moment that you open the gate, you will be assaulted by the smell of sweat. And this also highlights the need, for example, access to water, access to ventilation. And it's important that they see it themselves, because these young people, they're going to be future lawmakers, they're going to be future government workers, they're going to be making decisions. And I want them to remember that experience when it's their turn to make these decisions, when it's their turn to decide if this is a policy that they agree with or they disagree with. I want them to remember the face of that person that they interviewed in jail. And I hope so far we've been relatively successful. We've had a few law students who are now working with the Commission on Human Rights, trying to protect the rights of women, the rights of children. So I feel like it's a step towards the right direction. First, we'd like an end to criminalization. We want the law to be changed in such a way that you will no longer be arrested for using drugs, for possessing drugs, and even for low-level selling of drugs. Because in the Philippines, so many people caught for drug selling are actually selling minuscule amounts, mostly for survival. And if people are selling so small amounts of drugs to survive, sending them to jail isn't going to help anyone or anything. It's not the solution. So that's the first thing. The second maybe is to totally divert people from the criminal justice system towards public health, towards social services, towards economic assistance. If people are using drugs for whatever reason, then there should be, programs should respond to what people need and not just send them to jail. And I think it's also important to remember at this point that not everyone who uses drugs requires any intervention or requires rehabilitation. So we're also not saying that instead of jail, send them to rehabilitation. We feel that that's not also going to be a viable solution. I think the important thing is to provide a space where people who use drugs actually have a say in how programs are designed, so that we know what they really want and what they really need. Like, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not an expert on drug use. The person who should be talking about what drugs are for, how they help or not help, what are the effects, what do they need, what help people need when they're using drugs, should be people who use drugs. But we don't have that. It's not a possibility when you arrest them or when you put them in danger for being killed. Like, how can you expect people who use drugs to participate in policy making, to participate in program design, to participate in program implementation if in the first place they're afraid to admit that they use drugs? So that's one of the, I think, important asks that need to be made. If we truly want a community-led response to drug use, we have to stop arresting people for drug use. We have to have a place for them at the table where decisions are being made. And we won't be able to do that if they're afraid of speaking up, if they're afraid of admitting that they're using drugs because they could get killed or they could get arrested. Why should we care about people who use drugs and people in detention? They're just like you and me. They have hopes and dreams. Many of them are just struggling to survive, just like you and me. The only difference is that they were put in a situation that has caused this harm to them. It's not even the drug use. It's the reaction to the drug use. It's the policies about the drug use that cause these harms. And yet we judge people for being in these harmful situations. I feel like we forget that all of us are human and all of us have the potential to also make mistakes, to make right or wrong decisions. And I think that the most that we can do is to take care of each other while we try to make the right decisions. And even more so if we feel like we're not sure about the decisions that we're making in our lives. Unfortunately, society has a tendency to judge those who decide differently. But we're not a monolith. People are different. We deal with situations in different ways. Some people try to relax using drugs. Some people go to a casino and gamble. Some people watch television. Some people smoke a joint. Some people have a drink. What's the difference? We're all just trying to survive. The point to remember is that people who use drugs, they're people. People who are incarcerated, who are deprived of liberty, they are people before they are anything else. The drug use, the deprivation of liberty is a very small part of who they are as human beings. But we focus on that so much that we forget that in the end, we're the same. We want to survive. We want to spend time with the people that we love. We have hopes and dreams. And I think we have a responsibility to each other that we forget. We should be taking care of each other instead of judging others for making different decisions.